Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Decoding Digital. I'm Leon Carvley, the founder and director here at Door4, and this is our December Decoding Digital event, our festive special, part of the regular series of events that we run here at Door4 for education, for sharing our knowledge, for sharing technical information, for performance marketing businesses. I'm really pleased to say that in March, we're hoping that our Decoding Digital events will be back out on the road in real life, and we'll be able to start seeing you all face to face. We'll see what happens over the next few weeks. We'll be running these events in Lancashire, in Manchester, and further afield. So yeah, we'll see you face to face in 2022. But for now, we're here on Zoom. A quick intro to Door4. We're a performance marketing agency. We work with clients all over the UK and around Europe, working on performance marketing with our reach, convert, and scale philosophy for our acquisition, conversion rate experience, conversion rate user experience and conversion rate optimization, and strategic digital services. Today's event that you've all kindly tuned in for is the Performance Blueprint. We have three fantastic speakers with you here today who've all given up their time to be with you, to share some knowledge, share some insights, and hopefully make you a better modern marketer. I'll just pull up our panelists. This morning, we've got Steph Bridgman, an accredited media analyst, a member of the board of the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication. That's quite a mouthful, but it's a great accreditation for our speaker, Steph. This morning, today, she's going to be talking about search listening and how brands can exploit search platform data to really understand what customers want and help them to deliver better content and better experiences in line with customer needs. We have James Hayes, Director of Business Development at Parcel Hub. Today, James will be exploring the customer journey and in particular how optimizing that journey can turn your customers into champions and advocates. Our third speaker today is Tom Morton, our very own Head of Acquisition here at Door4, who will be reviewing some of the impacts that Apple's iOS 14 update has on your advertising data. We've had a few months to get to grips with it now, and he'll be showing you some practical ways that you can still measure traffic and sales ethically. So a quick note about our agenda this morning and how Decoding Digital will run. Our three speakers will all be with you for about 20 minutes each. They'll have lots to say in that time. We like to keep it short. We like to keep it snappy. We invite you during the presentations to ask questions. If you're watching on Zoom, use the Q&A feature that's built into Zoom. If you're on LinkedIn, posting comments, and we'll post these straight to our speakers after the third speaker. So after Tom's spoken, in round about 50 minutes to an hour, our three speakers will come back in and we'll be there to answer questions for you. So we welcome anything. There's no such thing as a silly question. As tough as you want to challenge the guests or something that you think will help you on your own journey. So without further ado, I'm going to invite Steph Bridgman into Vision. Steph, do you want to join us?
Hi, Leon. Thank you.
Good morning, Steph. We can hear you there. Great, thank you. And there's a video. Lovely to have you with us.
Share my screen momentarily. Tell me if you can see my screen too.
That looks great, Steph. Thank you. Yeah, you got good full screen. It's great to have you with us. I'm just going to hand straight over to you this morning, Steph. So I'll let you introduce your presentation to our panelists, to our guests. Off you go.
Brilliant. Thanks, Leon. Thanks ever so much, Door4, for inviting me. So I guess before I go on to explain why some of the biggest organizations in the world are exploring essentially the power of our thoughts through looking at what we search for in Google to create content which resonates with your target audiences, let me just tell you a little bit about myself because I work in a really niche industry. So let me just get this page down function going. There we go. Yeah, so my name's Steph Bridgman. I run my own consultancy called Experienced Media Analysts, and we provide services to the media measurement and media intelligence industry, but actually through all of their clients are some of the biggest brands in the world. We also work with marketing PR agencies directly and also with in-house communications departments. Essentially, what we do is we analyze media coverage and media signals so that those brands can optimize their messaging and really get a sense of the strength of their reputation. As Leon mentioned, I'm also on the board of our trade association, which is called AMEC, but perhaps it should be called IAMEC or something, because it's the International Association for the Measurement and Evaluation of Communication. On that board, I'm also involved in bringing together academics that work in the communications, that teach in the communications field. And my role is to bring the practice of communications measurement closer to the academics that write about and teach in this field. So let me tell you a little bit more about media evaluation, because you might not have even heard about it. So media ad valuation, I started off in the industry about 20 years ago, and we read media coverage. We work with brands, we sometimes read their media coverage or we read their competitors' media coverage, and we break it down and we analyze it qualitatively. We tell them how favorable it is, for example, whether that coverage is being proactively generated through campaign work or whether it's coming as reactively due to some issues or crises that might be happening. We tell those brands the extent of the prominence of that media coverage about their organization, and we tell them whether that content is in print or online or social media locations, for example. We advise them whether that content is on message or not, so that they can really work with that content and improve it as it goes forward. And that's all very well, isn't it, analysing media coverage. It gives an idea of how well your agencies are performing. Perhaps it also gives an idea of how well you're doing against competition on certain key factors. But on certain key metrics, really, how are people doing against the competition? What are people, it's all very well on knowing what people are writing and what journalists are writing about a brand, but actually what are people thinking? And so I wanted to introduce to you the concept of search listening, which is a new metric that we're increasingly using with our client projects. And it's about using the data that sits behind Google search to really understand the strengths of the brand and how, the kind of actions that people are taking perhaps as a result of having been exposed to this communications that you might be putting out there. So search listening, what is it? Have you ever noticed when you start typing something into Google, these little buttons pop up? It's essentially called Google autocomplete. The information you can see on the screenshot just now is the Google autocomplete when I prepped for this session back in sort of last week of November. And those were the searches that happened to be trending at the time. I put in a space in it and the Google autocomplete opened up for me and showed me what others were searching for. Probably with a UK slant, obviously, because Google takes into account my location when it responds back and tells me what people are searching for. So just take a little bit more notice of this Google autocomplete, because brands can use that for various different in various different ways, which I'm going to go on to explain later on. And some people say that we live our best lives on social media, but we actually live our real lives on the internet. And it's actually amazing what people put into the internet is completely different to what they might put out there on social media. Effectively, think about it, what we put on our social media feeds is a curated version of ourselves. So if you're working with a brand and you're looking at what's being said about your brand on social media, you're only really looking at one side of how people feel about your brand or your organization. But by being able to understand exactly what people are searching for, actually their sort of darkest, deepest thoughts, we can really tap into what's going on inside people's heads. And on the screen here, there's a book on the left-hand side that I'm suggesting that if anybody's interested in the concept of search listening, that you go out and buy. It's called Everybody Lies. And it's just got some really fascinating studies in there. A lot of data around voting intention, for example, particularly in the US, and how the power of internet search behaviors helped to really understand what was going on deep down, how often actually some of that data proved to be more correct than some of the polling data that was out there. And I just want to ask you a question, and I've got here on the screen a screenshot from Google Trends. And it's a bit of a flippant and silly example, but it often makes me laugh. And I've actually stolen this anecdote from some colleagues who I work with from an organization called Answer the Public. They often use this example as a really good case study in how certain elements of communication can lead to action, i.e. search. So why do you think people back in the summer of 2019 started searching for the eagle, as we can see here in this screenshot from Google Trends. Well, this is the reason, actually. I don't know if any of you have Love Island fans, but that's Curtis Pritchard, who was on Love Island some years ago. And apparently, I think I was watching this series, but don't particularly remember this episode. But there was some talk. He was talking about a sex position, basically. It was called the Eagle, but nobody else had really heard of it. And a lot of the viewers there, of course, probably hadn't heard of it too. So that's one of the reasons why there was a huge spike in search in the summer of 2020 for this particular search term. And I just wanted to sort of bring that up as a sort of flippant and silly, but perhaps memorable example as to why small things like somebody saying one thing on a TV program can lead to action by a lot of people. So let me explain to you a little bit about how my clients use search listening, and there are different ways they use it. So my line of business is about working with brands to look at media signals to assess how well their communications campaigns have performed. And so a lot of brands will use Google search data in terms of understanding behaviors and awareness, so to speak, pre and post campaign. There are other brands, of course, that will use the power and the information and the insight from search listening to better power their content creation. Because, of course, if you understand how your audiences are searching and you're able to then create content that matches the words and the phrases that they might be using when they're searching, then that means you're really putting out content that will resonate with them and is actually going to be more likely to land well in Google search results too. And then I want to go on to explain how some organizations use Google search data in a sense as a way of doing an element of competitive benchmarking. So here's a particular case study. Don't know if anybody remembers this example from earlier in the year, actually, 2021. I thought this was last year, but it's actually more recently than I recall. And it was an example of one of those tweets from a brand that goes viral. And here we go. It's the tweet from Weetabix where it was suggesting that we bake beans on our Weetabix. And you can see from the engagement data just on this tweet how well it performed. And I guess the social media agency involved with Weetabix at the time will have used this screenshot and detail around that strong level of engagement in terms of the retweets and likes and so on, and thus I imagine the reach figure that would sit behind it as an example of how well this campaign would have performed. And I guess one of the purposes behind this campaign for Weetabix was about getting people talking and getting people thinking about Weetabix, you know, to create a little bit of a viral discussion and get people talking. And so, of course, people did get talking with this particular campaign, and media coverage was created as a result of it. You know, the content on social went viral, and therefore the marketing newspapers and marketing press picked up on it, reported it. That in itself probably led to further behaviours. So that would have been another example and another evidence point in terms of awareness and pickup of the campaign. It would have been the analysis of the media coverage that resulted from it. But also there are other ways in which we can demonstrate the success of the campaign. And of course, you can see that demonstrated through the Google Trends screenshot that I've got on the screen, sort of top right hand of the screen now. And we can see a huge spike in searches around the term Weetabix and baked beans, exactly around about the time that the post went out. And with Google Trends, it's wonderful because you can put in your key search terms. You can limit it to certain particular geographic regions. For example, I've got here on the screen, it's limited to just United Kingdom search, but we could have shown this on a global basis or compared searches in different markets. I've limited the results for the past 12 months, but the great thing about Google Trends is that you can actually go back as far as 2014 to see how different searches have performed over time. And what it does is it normalizes that data. It doesn't give you the actual volume of search data for that particular phrase, but it on a 100-point scale tells you where the relative highest point of search was. So we can see that that highest point of search is around about the beginning of February when the social media post went out. But just a very simple way of gathering evidence as to how this campaign performed and the extent to which people were talking about the campaign is also evidenced by taking a screenshot from Google Autocomplete, which you can see on the bottom right hand side of the screen here. So we can see that there are people searching about Weetabix baked beans, of course, but also about the Twitter thread, about the responses, about the actual campaign itself. We can see that in 9th position down at the bottom of the list here. And so sort of just a tip for you really is that sometimes if you're putting out a piece of content or if you're working on a particular campaign, have a think about some of the behaviours that might happen when that campaign is completed. Can you provide evidence beforehand of that behaviour not happening? Perhaps that could be evidence through search. And then can you take a screenshot or look at Google Trends data after their campaign has happened and see if you can surface any evidence of people effectively looking for further information or searching around a key phrase or a key topic to demonstrate that people are actually taking action as a result of the communications that you put out there. And so then there's another way of using search listening data. And I'm showing here a screenshot from a tool that I really love to use. It's called Answer the Public. And that eagle sex position anecdote actually was stolen from Answer the Public. So I have to credit that with them too. Now with Answer the Public, it's actually a free tool that you can use. By the way, I'm not sort of paid by them. I just think that they do brilliant work, but they have a free tool which has throttled access. So I think you're allowed 3 free searches per day. I've got access to their Pro tool, which allows a lot of additional features, such as the ability to compare search patterns in different markets, for example, and their Pro feature also allows you to be able to evidence changes in searches over a given period of time. But what I've got here on the screen is one of their beautiful visualizations. So what they do is they effectively take all of that data from Google Autocomplete, but they do it sort of times 50 for every search. So it saves you an awful lot of time. So you can put in your search term into the middle of Answer the Public. I've put in here the search term Burnley, for example. And it does an awful lot of searches in association with other words. So it will come back to you with a range of searches linked back to questions. So, you know, who, what, why, or when. Or prepositions, for example, you know, with, for, near, or can, or comparisons. So, for example, the and words, the or like, or versus words. And we can see here, I've sort of zoomed in a little bit on the right-hand side of the screen, but we can see here, for example, that there are searches coming back linking Burnley with Benidorm, for example. When you dig a little bit deeper there, it's linked to an advertising campaign, I think, that was happening around about 2020 for Daz, featuring Paddy McGuinness. And obviously, I don't know if it had links to Burnley, if it was shot in Burnley, but there was obviously association between the place name and that particular brand there, and perhaps that might have been also used by that brand as evidence of people, you know, taking interest and being aware of that particular campaign. What I think is really interesting here on the top right hand corner, we see the kinds of searches that are associated with Burnley and then the letter Y, for example. And we see, whilst it doesn't give you the volume of searches, it gives you through the color coding of the little green dots there, the relative levels of search. So at the top, we can see that Burnley Youth Theatre has a higher level of search than, for example, Burnley Yellow Kit at the bottom. But we can see that there's a reasonable amount of search happening, it seems, there for Burnley Yorkshire. So my advice perhaps might be there is that if you're working in the tourist segment in Burnley, perhaps if people are searching for Burnley Yorkshire, perhaps put out some content that has the word Burnley and Yorkshire in it, even though Burnley isn't in Yorkshire, you know, perhaps 10 reasons why Burnley isn't in Yorkshire. Because people are searching for it, it might be easier for that content to actually surface on page 1 of Google because others aren't competing for those same search terms. So that's just another way in which search data can be used to sort of almost inspire content itself. And then also in terms of competitive benchmarking. So I used to be on the board at both Accrington Rossendale College and Nelson and Con College. And it's really interesting. It's a very competitive market in the further education space. There's a limited amount of students, only so many courses available, and so on. So everybody's fighting over the same students, and sometimes there isn't the budget there to go out and do a stakeholder analysis or real in-depth market research about your potential audience. But what can you do in a cost-effective way? Well, search listening, search data can be really interesting. And what we've got here just on the screen is again, screenshots taken from Google Trends, where it put in some of the search terms. So we put in Nelson and Cole College next to Burnley College and next to Accrington and Rossendale College, and then understanding the relative levels of search about those colleges against each other. So on the top of the screen, I think what I ended up doing actually was supporting them with a pro bono marketing performance report. And this was a really interesting slide that a lot of the other governors and directors were interested in seeing, because on a very simple level, we can see a significantly higher volume of internet search for effectively the two competing colleges there at the time, Nelson and Cole, Burnley College, compared to Accrington and Rossendale College. And actually, when I took the screenshot at one time and then looked at it a couple of years later, that sort of level of relative level of search had sort of further grown apart. And that can be a really interesting way in which you can gather data sort of on a competitive basis to explore if there are different levels of search for perhaps your organization and a sort of competing organization in a similar field, whether the extent of that search over time changes, whether you have sort of similar peaks and troughs in search over time. And then I just wanted to finish by introducing you to this concept of a metric called share of search. The Institute for Practitioners in Advertising actually took out a full-page spread in the Financial Times, I think some time ago, almost sort of bigging up this new metric in the industry, share of search. And there was some data that was put out that that suggests that if you're looking at search patterns around a particular brand and then against its competition, it can be a really interesting, perhaps early indicator of market share. And I've got on the screen at the bottom just how we used the idea of share of search in a particular report we were doing around car brands and how they were performing against each other in different markets. So we've got Germany, India and Australia's performance there. And then we've got the relative levels of search between some of the key car brands and then all of the other car brands combined. And I use a tool to collect this data to power these share of search pie charts, because you need to understand the relative levels of search. All those other tools that I've talked through there pictured the levels of search, but didn't really give you an idea of the volume of search. But using tools, I use a tool called KW Finder, but many of the tools effectively that will run off the Google AdWords program, which will give a clearer indication as to the actual volume of search for particular key phrases. You need to be able to understand, first of all, what your complete universe is, to be able to understand how many searches there are in your category. So in this example here, not only did we look at the levels of search for the Audi brand, BMW, Jaguar, and so on, but we actually had to explore the searches for all of the different car brands that there could possibly be in that particular market in order to understand the total universe of that search, and then to be able to assess the relative levels of search of those brands within those particular markets. So as I wrap up, so what are the tools that I use with brands to give them an indication of the performance of their marketing? Well, two of the tools I use are free tools. So they're the Google Trends tools and the Google Autocomplete tools. And often it's just a case of really being curious about the data and going in there, exporting some of their the PDFs, or actually just taking some screenshots and being able to bring some of that data into your performance reports. And then there are a couple of those paid for tools that I mentioned. So we've got Answer the Public, which is again at a reasonable price. Keyword Finder, which is the tool I use to get the volumes, which links back to the Google AdWords, around about £50 per month. And that's it for me for now. I just wanted to introduce you to the power of search and the power of search data to demonstrate the performance of your campaign.
Thank you very much for that, Steph. That was an excellent presentation. Those of us here in our studio, we're really enjoying that, and I'm sure the guests have as well. I think when we've worked with brands at an early stage of understanding search, they've often had a kind of a predefined view of which search terms they want to rank for, what they think they should be top of Google and performing for. But in reality, as you've explained really well there, you've really got to respond to what the customers and what the audience actually want. And that's really the definition of marketing in general, isn't it? So that's amazing. Thanks, Steph. We've seen some good engagement in chat there. Would encourage everybody to drop some Q&A into, those of you on Zoom, that is, drop them into the Q&A. And again, those of you on LinkedIn, if you've got any questions for Steph, I'm sure you do after that presentation, please drop them in the comments on LinkedIn. Thanks very much, Steph. We'll see you shortly for questions and answers after our next couple of speakers. With that, I'm going to ask James Hayes to come in and join us. Good morning to you, James. We'll just unmute you.
Am I unmuted now?
You're all good there, James. Top of the morning. How are you today?
I'm great, Leon. Morning. How are you?
Oh, yeah, really good. I'm just going to ask Steph to stop sharing your screen there, if that's okay. Thank you. Is it James's? There, we're all good. Yeah, we're all good. Technical gremlins aside, we're doing well. Really, really good. Nice to see you, James. I hope you're looking forward to sharing some insights this morning with we've got a good few dozen people on our various channels this morning. So I'm going to hand the reins over to you. I'll let you share your screen and I'll confirm when we're good to go. You sound good.
Cheers,
you look good, and I'm sure your presentation is going to look good shortly as well.
You're charming as ever, Leon. Morning, everyone. Steph, I really enjoyed what you were sharing there. It was really insightful. Thank you very much for sharing that search insight, Steph. Thank you. So yeah, morning, everyone. Yeah, this weird new world of presentations. One of the best and equally worst things about presenting in this way is not being able to see the people when you're on stage, or the virtual stage as we are these days. The best not knowing the faces when they're looking at you with a look of, God, get off the stage because what you're saying is awful. Or the opposite is when you are delivering something really insightful and you're getting the faces respond saying, this is great, give me some more. So I'm just going to hope that I'm getting the faces of give me some more, because I can't see any of you, of course. Anyway, morning, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully I'll give you some positive vibes about what I'm about to share. So I have a question for you. Who here is an online retailer or seller of goods? Normally there'd be a show of hands. And who of you think that you know your customers and what those customers want from an online retailer? That's an interesting question, and one you've probably answered, I know them really well, of course I do. And you may well do. However, the basis of what I'm sharing today is from an industry survey that we've carried out along with our friends at Brightpearl, where we got retailer and consumer input. And the survey finds gaps in between what a retailer thinks a consumer wants and what a consumer actually wants from an online retailer. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the end-to-end customer experience and how you can use post-purchase experience as a customer retention tool. So if I share screen, press that, hopefully that works. Using 3 screens is always a challenge to know where you're at. So I'm James. I'm a bit of an e-commerce addict, some would say. I especially love tech that helps solve headaches in and around e-commerce. So when we think about customer experience, most people think about on-site personalization or search, as Steph was sharing, intelligent search, use of content and information, the way the site is laid out, checkout experience, loyalty programs, the list goes on. All incredibly important when building the blocks of your end-to-end customer experience. But often not much thought is given to the post-purchase experience, what we call the back office, and the impact that this has on what a consumer remembers when shopping online, and therefore your ability to keep that customer. So we all know the world is changing. It's in our faces every flipping day. Unfortunately, so much has changed. It's hard for us to focus on just one thing. If you're like me, there's a million and one things going on at once. So it is really hard to keep focused. But let's look at some specifics and how these changes have affected the experience and how we shop. So roughly 50 shops a day are closing in the UK. Proper sad. It's really bad, but it's the truth, and that's what's happening at the moment. But it means that certain items that I used to buy in store, I can no longer, because the store's closed. So I buy it online now. Some great stats of the growth in e-commerce, 26% of sales now are through the internet. 2 years ago, pre-pandemic, that was about 18%. So it might not sound like a big change, but that's 50% growth to online in 2 years. HMRC data also shows that more new businesses were created in any other month since records began. And for a 12-month period from March 21 back was 835,000 businesses were created, which is just astounding. But in particular, a huge increase in that is in online retail businesses. An average of 4,613 new e-commerce businesses per month being set up. So by the end of this session, that's about another 10 businesses have been created whilst I've been talking. So it's fair to say that a lot of new companies have entered the market. It's also fair to say that a lot of established businesses have grown more and faster than they anticipated. Manufacturers are now selling online. So they've all found themselves running a very different type of business than they were 18 months ago. New channels, new customers, new competitors. With that increased competition, new brands, and those who have had to shift towards online sales, and a finite amount of demand, costs and the impression of costs and the acquisition costs have increased rapidly, especially where a lot of businesses are reliant on platforms like Facebook, which is used by 90% of marketers out there. I'll put it another way. For the same budget as last year, you're going to reach a lot less people today. Throw in the added control that Apple has given users to control the apps, third-party cookie challenges and changes, and giving the consumer more power over their data means that it's an opportunity that it's more important to retain customers because it's harder to acquire. So if the cost of acquisitions are going up, if you're not growing CLV, customer lifetime value, then you're really eating into your margins. And client lifetime value, CLV, has to respond and increase. I love this slide. So keep all that in mind. When I show you where it can all go wrong. So we're going to assume that you're all really good at nailing the front end experience, which is on the left-hand side of the screen here. You're attracting clients, they're evaluating your product, they're putting it in the basket, they're checking out, they're becoming a new customer, and the order's landing in the back office system. Perfect. But what happens here in the middle, Mr. Redface and Mrs. Blueface, or Mr. and Mrs. whatever? What happens here in between acquisition and growth? This is the back office, the operation, as a lot of my clients put it, their engine room. Ben from Gymshark, he talks about this all the time. Gymshark's operation is crucial to the success of that brand. And he's right. You fail to deliver your products, you're going to fail to grow. So let's look at this. The red grumpy face had an issue with an order. Late shipment, wrong item sent, late delivery, driver couldn't find the address, but no one contacted them to try and resurrect it, or it's delivered damaged, etc. So that customer never enters the growth phase of their relationship with you as a seller of product. So you're back to acquiring another customer because you've lost the one you've acquired. So break that cycle, move more clients into the growth phase, you will grow as a retailer. We'll go into that a little bit more in a second. So the figure at the bottom there, 77% of negative feedback being operational issues is often right. Check your reviews on Google, on Trustpilot or Reviews.io, whichever ones you use, and analyze them. Look at the reasons that you're getting reviews, good and bad. So this all might quite sound obvious, because who wouldn't believe that post-purchase experiences affects the overall experience? Well, there's a clear gap between what consumers say is important, which is the blue line across the top, and what retailers think consumers want, the reddy orange line across the bottom. So this data is from the survey that we released a few months back with Brightpearl. So let's look at it. Beyond the buy button, right? The likelihood of customers coming back and remaining loyal to a brand hugely depends on what happens during the delivery and receipt of the items. And the future success of retailers in their respective competitive areas will be determined by the ability to match consumers' growing expectations in this respect. Okay. However, this survey reveals that consumers stop doing business with brands for very different reasons than the merchant thinks. So let's look at the consumer view. So some of the top reasons why consumers said that they would stop doing business with a brand include poor product quality, high delivery costs, poor customer support, missing and wrong items delivered. And that compares to much lower results for any of the pre-purchase issues, such as website problems, item out of stock on the website, which were both ranked the lowest from a consumer's point of view. The post-buy button experience is therefore arguably the most important piece of the buyer's journey to get right. On the other hand, the retailer's view, they ranked both potential pre-purchase issues as the highest, with 43% saying that an item out of stock would cause a customer to stop doing business with the brand, and 30% quoting website problems as a reason. While these might stop an individual purchase, neither of them rank high in the minds of consumers as they do in the minds of the retailers. So there's the gap. And think about the importance of reviews with this, as it is the last touch associated with a brand, with your brand. It's also the most likely time that consumers will be leaving reviews, which inform the views of potential new customers. A stat for you, 92% of consumers we surveyed considered reviews to be important. So if you've got a pile of negative reviews, that's going to hamper, that's going to restrict your growth opportunity, because you're not going to acquire as many new customers because you've got negative reviews. So if it's the operation which is causing negative experiences, acquisition costs are increasing, as we know, but the goal for you is to increase that customer lifetime value. Doesn't it make sense to cover why operations are the main factor in poor experiences? The research tells us that it is. So around half of the consumers that we surveyed said that they've had between 1 and 3 bad experiences directly related to shipping or delivery or tracking within the last year. So that's quite a lot. only 22% of retailers think that they're offering the best post-sales process that they can. So a lot of retailers acknowledge that they've not got this right. So there's room for improvement, no question. An absolute given, and if you're not doing this, you need to. 97% of these consumers have said that post-purchase information is important to them. So things like order updates, a link to the parcel tracking. If you're not keeping the consumer informed and involved with the journey, then almost all of them are expecting it. So you really need to do it. So that's what the research has been telling us. Operations can actually be a differentiator, a support acquisition of new customers too. We say this all the time in Parcel Hub. Imagine the positive tweets from a wonderful delivery experience that you've created. That positive interaction with that consumer will be seen by tens, hundreds, maybe thousands of other people who then potentially likely to come and check out you as a brand because you've done something great for one of your customers and they've shared it on Twitter. So give the consumer, should I say, customer, give them choice, okay? How do you nail your operations? So that is by giving them choice at checkout. Not everyone wants the next day delivery. Me, I am captain last minute when it comes to buying things online. Right now, I am dreading getting everything in time for Christmas. I can see me in the Trafford Centre on Christmas Eve getting everything. But I don't always want to pay £6.99 for next day delivery. If I am organised, I want that choice of free, cheap, or the slower delivery option. So that says that your consumers have got different buying habits. They've got different buying desires. So make sure you've got multiple delivery options available to them. Make sure your order processing is streamlined, your back office system, often called order management system. Make sure it's giving you rich data that you can process and get those orders out of the warehouse as fast as possible with no errors. A delivery management system. So Parcel Hub here, come a little, not so little, subtle plug. Parcel Hub provides software that monitors shipments that you've sent. So that when there are issues, delays, misroutes, damages, common issues like that, it brings them to your attention in real time so you can act on them immediately. Remember, this is where you lose customers at the delivery point. So just by sending the parcels and assuming they will all be delivered, that's a big mistake. You want to make them return as a customer. Operations isn't just the warehouse. Your CS team, your customer service team, play a vital role here. They should monitor orders out for delivery in real time. One of my favorite examples of nailing this, we do this all the time with our customers. When a parcel picks up a scan, such as bad address or delayed, use that event to your advantage. You can get on the front foot. When one of these events happen, it will often mean a delay to that delivery or a risk to a failed delivery. So why not tell your customer there's been an issue? It's another contact, it's another touch, it's another moment of, we value you, Mr. Customer. Message them, call them, tell them about the delay, but importantly, that you've seen it before they've seen it and you fixed it. Say you're sorry, but best that you know, as we don't want customers calling in upset with us when they realise it's 7 p.m. at night while they're watching Corrie that their order hasn't showed up. So prioritise the next day orders, check that they've all arrived, take action if not. Your 2 to 3 day shipments, make sure they're on target, make sure they're going to arrive, take action if not. It's being on the front foot. If you spend a little time focusing on the 5% of orders that have issues, and it is only 5% as an industry average, you're more likely to retain and importantly enter those clients into the growth phase of your journey with that client. So you can turn a negative into a positive, even if that parcel has been lost. By being honest, upfront, and in front of the problem, you can win your customers' loyalty because you've showed you care. I'd almost guarantee that customers that didn't get their order will come back and buy again because you went the extra mile. Just remember how much time and effort you've spent and money you spent acquiring that customer. Why ignore them at the back end of the journey after you've gone so far to acquire them. So what's next? What can you do? Evaluate your reviews. Look for common keywords that might be around your delivery, your warehouse, your messaging. Look at what the feedback is, implement the change. Look at technology that's there to support you with those reviews. How can you get more positive? How can you get less negative? What technology is out there to streamline the orders, to get more orders out of the door from a fulfillment point of view? You might realize that actually we're failing as our own warehouse. We can't cope with this all on our own anymore. We need to outsource to a third party that knows how to do fulfillment. You might not be able to do an 8 p.m. cutoff because you can't get the staff in at nighttime to support a later cutoff on your website. Is that a reason to outsource to a third-party retailer, a third-party logistics provider? And technology is out there to help protect you as much as possible, keep those clients at the end of that journey, like a delivery management platform, to make sure that you're not failing deliveries. So when you're entering that growth phase, you're not failing to grow. You're embracing that growth, and you're making your customers stay with you and spend more and more money. So don't spend all that time. It's my final takeaway. Don't spend all that time and effort acquiring customers without making sure your back office supports that consumer end to end. Thank you very much.
Super. Thanks ever so much for that, James. That was a really, really insightful presentation. I think all of the retailers and marketers that are involved in a guest today will have got a lot from that. It's easy to think very much about the front end of digital marketing, but then those operational considerations that come in at the end. You often see with a lot of businesses seem to be a bit of an afterthought, but by taking away some insight from your presentation there, hopefully there are some improvements to be made. Thanks ever so much. Anybody that's got any questions for James after that presentation, please drop them in Q&A on Zoom or drop them into comments on LinkedIn. Thanks very much for that, James. And we'll see you in about 10 or 15 minutes for the Q&A. I'm going to bring Tom in now. Good morning, Tom Morton.
Hello.
Good morning to you.
Can't start video just yet. Oh, there we go.
There we go. Welcome from the deepest, darkest studio. Welcome. Yeah. So, Tom, this morning you're going to be talking about iOS 14 and the impacts that it's had on advertisers and performance, aren't you? So
I am.
I'm going to hand straight over to you.
Cool. Just before you go, can everyone see my screen?
We can see that. That's all looking good, Tom.
Fantastic. Great stuff. Right. Brilliant. So, as Leo mentioned, I'll be looking at iOS 14.5 update, and I'm just going to unpack it a little bit for marketers. Go to the next slide. As mentioned, I'm Tom Morton, Head of Acquisitions at Door4. In fact, I'd like to steal the chart that James had previously, had the big acquisition funnel. It's probably easier to explain to friends and family what I do on a daily basis. So, for a little bit of background, back in 2021, all the way back in January, iOS 14 was launched. And we've seen some incremental updates over the year. I think we're on iOS 15.2 as of today, so this is quite early, but also some historic background for you. So if you're an Apple user, you may have seen like this little notification every time you log into Facebook or you download a new app. That's basically allowing the users to allow tracking or not to allow tracking. And since they've been doing this over the year, they've kind of tweaked and messed with it over the years. So I'll just go into a little bit more detail on that. So basically, it's affected anyone who runs adverts or boosted posts on Facebook since January 2021. And that equates to roughly around 98% of advertisers online. I know James quoted 90% earlier, so it's around that. It's a very, very high number. In particular, if you look what it affected, it's the target audience tools, the web conversion tracking, so that's events, clicks, form submissions, the stuff that you really need, and advertising on mobile apps, the third party outside of Facebook, and the ability to really optimize the ads. Now, one of the problems with this in particular is, as you know, if you don't know who's buying on through Facebook, you can't really advertise to this audience that's now a buying group. So obviously that's quite a bit of a problem for the modern marketer. Now, if you're wondering of how many people are actually opting into this to allow, to stop tracking, it's roughly worldwide within the first 3 weeks was around about 15%. Now, to put that into context, that's roughly 1 billion people in the world that currently use iPhones that are active and using them. Now, that equates to obviously 150 million people, and that, for real context, is just about half the amount of people in the USA at the current moment in time. So it's quite a chunk of people. So if you ask the standard user, what does it mean? It's all about privacy online. So it's a bit of a pro for them. They think, people aren't tracking my data, but you could argue you've got your phone in your pocket regardless. So Apple knows what you're doing anyway. It's just a different company who knows it, not just Facebook or other third-party apps. And technically on Facebook, you should see less ads that follow you around the internet. I know if everyone's doing Christmas shopping at the minute, or you're leaving it quite late, like me and James, you'll probably see a lot of remarketing adverts. That basically means if you click on something or you're interested in something, you'll be featured adverts that are relevant to that further on. If you opted out of the tracking for Facebook, you'll see a lot less of that. But really, that's the long and short of it, and that's really about it for the users. However, if you look at the cons of it, I've actually posted a couple of examples of some bad adverts. That the top one I've seen on Wish recently, and I remembered one that was doing the rounds on the news earlier. So basically, this is because of less personalised advertising. Now, I can imagine someone is in the market for some hood for a cat. I'm not quite sure what it is, but it's £1. I might buy it, might see what it does. But also you could buy a picture of the former Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, which is a bit of a weird one. Not sure who's trying to buy that, but that's the kind of example that you could get for some pretty bad advertising. And basically what it means for marketers, and you look at the pros for it, it's really nothing much at all. It's really not good. Like this example of the GIF, when you want to throw the PC in the bin. It's been something we've been wrestling with for the last year, to varying degrees across varying businesses throughout agencies across the UK and, well, the rest of the world. But if you really look into the cons, this is really where you really do see the problems for it. Pixel events are now limited to only 8 main categories. Previously, I think it was around about 25. Now, you want to have the top level ones like conversions, purchases, form fills, or something like that. But you'd also want some softer conversions to know that touch points on your site could indicate that a user is looking to buy, and you could maybe target them a little more aggressively. As a result, you're going to get less activity going through the pixel. So the less activity you got to the pixel, the limited data that you're going to have for optimization. Long and short, the more data, the more touch points, the better you can optimize for advertising to your target audience. And of course, we're going to see less advertising personalization, audience segmentation, performance, and reporting capabilities. Previously to this update, we had a 28-day click-through window, which still works for everyone but iOS users who have opted out of this, but now it's been narrowed down to 7 days. Now, that's not really good for a B2B company who their click window might be maybe even longer than 28 days. It could be months before they even talk to them. So you've really got to measure the touch points offline. And of course, there's going to be no real-time reporting. This is something that we have struggled with. So we've got to wait 3 days to really make some tangible tangible optimizations where we could be a little bit more reactive prior to this. So if you're slow to react, it means you're going to waste quite a lot more money than you would previously to this update. And of course, the main ad objective, so when you're starting up a campaign, you can pick between a few of these. Ones that we generally use in agency quite a lot is the traffic conversions and catalog sales. They're the ones that have been really effective from this update. We don't tend to do much with app installs, but obviously that's another beast entirely. They've really been affected by this update as well. You might ask yourself why it matters. So with Facebook, the value is always going to be in the data. I mean, they collect so much data on you, it's absolutely insane. It's the things like what you've looked at, time of day. I think they even track what credit card you have if you've paid for anything through one of the adverts at some point. That you can actually collect all this data. You can Google it. Or you can do this. You can do this on a couple of other platforms as well. The Google one, I think it was about 40 gigabytes what I downloaded, and that's got all your YouTube data and everything. But it's scary how much data Facebook actually has on you. I think I've had my account since about 2008, maybe a little bit earlier. So that's probably going to build a very good user persona of what I curate online. But as Steph said earlier, what you put online isn't necessarily the person who you actually are. It's a curated version of you, but it can still get a really good idea of what you're about and what your interests and dislikes and stuff like that is. And particularly as marketers, the more data that we have, the better we can target. So if we're better we can target, we can optimize to get a better return on ad spend. And it's exactly the same for Facebook with the machine learning. So the more data points and the more conversion data they have, the more the machine learning is going to work better, the better return on ad spend that everyone's going to get from that. So you might ask yourself, how do I know if I've been affected? So there's a few things that you can do to find out if that's the case. You just need to review your returns from Facebook year on year. If you haven't got that data, you can at least pinpoint it from at least January onwards, and you can see, are you spending more to get the same amount, or are you spending a lot more to get even less? That's something you want to be looking into. If you're a B2B marketer, you might have a larger click to conversion funnel, as I touched on earlier. You certainly have probably been affected in 2021. I've seen countless accounts coming through, and I've just looked year on year and gone, "Ooh, that doesn't look good." But as I say, it's only potentially 15%, so you might still have it, but you're not still fully tracking it if you've not done the steps I'm going to mention shortly. But if you're B2C and use mainly Facebook for remarketing, that's something that I highly recommend for a lot of people. You'll find you're probably spending about the same, if not a little bit more, to get the same results as previous year, which obviously is a bit of a problem. So there's one thing that we like to say in Door4, it's solutions, not problems. So I'm just going to break down a couple of things that you can do to maybe bring yourself back up to speed and get yourself going into 2022 to get Facebook back on track a little bit. So with the limited amount of tracking that we have, particularly for iOS users, we can recommend a few things. So what you need to do is fine tune your pixel to at least the max 8 touch points. Generally, I see people used to have quite a lot of them, or they'd have maybe one, which is generally kind of like the value goal, which is like purchase, or it might be contact form submission. So a few things that you want to have in there is just an example: view website, add item to cart, purchase, form submission, clicking on the phone number, or a custom event that's quite valuable to your business, such as clicking the live chat. So what you can do, these are the things that you need to do to kind of get some amount of your information back. Now, it's not going to be perfect as it was previously. It's just a few things that you got to keep in mind. There's some more black hat ways around it, but it's not something I'd like to really say on a live recorded broadcast, just in case it gets me in trouble. But maybe send me an email later. So the first thing you need to do is verify your domain on your Facebook business account. If you don't have that and you're currently just using boosted posts, I'd recommend signing up for a business account and verifying your domain with that. Make sure you delay your porting by at least 3 days, just so you can make any adequate changes before you say, okay, we want to cut this advert off, or we want to say, oh, actually this advert's working quite well, I want to move a lot more spend into it. One thing particularly for remarketing, you want to use segmented smaller retargeting pools, and you want to use that on a closed off window. So you want to use the 7-day window conversion rather than the 28 previously. That's just so it can include more of the iOS people. The idea of that is it's a smaller audience with smaller amount of data, so you can optimize that a lot quicker than you would be, say, if you had a big 28-day conversion window. And if you're an e-commerce business, you can use the value optimization for 100 purchases, but you've got to be 100 purchases within 7 days. I know that's not exactly for everyone, but that is a big game changer if you can optimize for that. Part 2, if your Facebook and your web conversions are no longer reporting on things like age, gender, region and ad placement, is a bit of a tough one. But the one thing that you can do is actually target by radius rather than location. So for example, if you wanted to target Greater Manchester, I'd suggest maybe dropping a pin somewhere like Bolton and then doing maybe a 10-mile radius or maybe larger. While you might not know exactly where they've come from, you're still getting the conversions through and you're hitting the right people. So you might ask yourself, why am I only hearing about this now? It's been out there, but I feel like it's never really been clearly explained in black and white. And I don't think I've even done a perfect job of how to do it. I've just highlighted some of the issues of what is there and then a couple of things that you can do to remedy it. There's full documentation out there that Facebook provide, which you can walk yourself through, hand it to a developer, whatever it might be. The one thing that I'd like to say for us, it's better to be starting now and get ahead of the curve, because I think a lot of changes are coming in the next coming years. Now, in particular, this is actually from today. I dumped this slide in today, this morning, got up at 7 o'clock, checked the news as I usually do, and iOS 15.2 is launching, I believe, today. Now, one of the features they've got within that is they're going to maybe stop putting on open rates. So that's really going to be a struggle if you rely on email, particularly in your business. So as you can see, this isn't just a Facebook exclusive thing. This is coming larger and larger and larger. And they've got a little feature now. If you pay 99p a month, it hides your real name and email address. So if your data collection is really important to your business, it's just not good for anyone. But that's another talk entirely. And just a couple last points. Not only is it that iOS, Apple, that they're going for this big transparency move, you'll find a lot of people are using internet blockers just to stop ads on the site. Personally, I've worked in advertising for well over 10 years, and I've used an advert blocker for well over 10 years. I know it sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but I think that number is only going to grow in the next coming years. So a couple of future predictions. The number of advertisers advertising VPNs to make it a little bit harder for advertisers, that's going to grow, especially when they're spending $1 million every single month. You've probably seen it on YouTube videos, targeted ads, you name it, it's all there. Lobbying for internet transparency is only going to increase, especially with big companies like Apple are moving towards this, and they're being very transparent with it. And as James touched on earlier, the cost of advertising online is rising, and it's continuing to rise. If you work day to day within this industry, the cost per click this time versus last year is completely different. And I just had a little screenshot of what I saw in the news today. Apple are now providing an app privacy transparency report. So what would happen is if you click that, it will give you a breakdown of absolutely everything that app has collected on you since the day dot. So that's going to include access to your microphone, the recordings, a little bit of scary stuff, network activities, where you've been. It's probably harmless data that they're collecting, but they are being more transparent. And I think that's definitely the future of advertising that we're going to see. Now, I think we're going to move over to a Q&A, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have in the next, however long it is.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that, Tom. Really, really insightful. Loads for us to learn there, and hopefully that's useful for all of our guests who joined us today. I'm going to invite Steph and James back into video as we move into Q&A. We've had some quite lively chat and conversation in the Q&A. Hi guys, you're all there. I think we're all in audio. Yes, we've had a few questions. I'm going to jump into Steph, if that's all right. You were the first up, so make sure that your voice is still working. And we've had a question: how many search terms are needed to establish share of search metrics? Surely there are thousands for each market category.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I suppose with that, for example, that car brand example that I showed before, we were looking for kind of branded search. So literally comparisons of the car brands against each other. So for that particular project, yeah, there was probably about 70 or so different car brands that we would have typed in and got the data back for. But again, some of the tools that we use allow us to bulk export all of that data at quite a decent amount of speed. So it's about it's defining what your universe is, and that's up to you to define. And again, you might end up doing a share of search not based on branded search. It might be around product areas or product names where perhaps that level of sort of comparison or that universe might be smaller. There's a great guide on the PRCA's website as well, which gives some really practical examples, prca.org.uk/innovation, and some great practical webinars to really get into the detail of how to do this going forward.
Brilliant, thanks. I'm sure that if anybody's got any detailed questions on that, they can get directly in touch with you. We'll make sure that your contact details are shared with the event. And just for everybody, there is the recording of the event will be available. It'll be available from the Door 4 website from later this week. James, where's my parcel? Which is usually the question that I think you and retailers and shipping companies often get. PODs and these kind of problems. All of us as consumers face that. So how can platforms like Parcel Hub, how can they kind of help me as a retailer monitor and manage those shipments?
Yeah, good question. We get asked that a lot. Where is my WISMO, we call it? Where is my order? Love an acronym. So your everything that you've sent as a retailer, if it's on a track service with the likes of Royal Mail, DPD, etc., will be scanned on its journey. So their data, there's their data points there. So we use those data points to highlight delivery issues. So let's say driver's on the street, he can't find the address, he can't find the house, he marks his handheld terminal as failed delivery, check address. Within seconds, Parcel Hub algorithm has spotted that event, because we're constantly scraping these events out of the carriers through the API integrations. And within minutes, often, then we've created a ticket within Parcel Hub to say, forced it to our customer service agents to investigate. So on the street, driver, check address, 3 minutes later, one of our team in Nottingham gets the job pushed to them as a ticket to investigate. And we then validate the address, check where the driver was with his GPS coordinates. Is there something not quite right? We'll tell the carrier the information. If we can't fix it, we then go to the retailer and say, we've got this issue, give us some extra information. Well, that's all done in real time. The parcel's still in the van of the courier in most cases. So you won't be able to get the courier to turn around and deliver it because he's on to his next drop, but you're going to fix it for it to go out the following day. So without us doing that, the couriers don't tell you these days that there's issues with deliveries on every single one, whereas we're on every single one. So you're going to have less returns, less cost of stuff coming back, more customers getting their order. And it gives you that touch point to contact them again and say, we love you, we've done something.
Yeah, good. I think this is the eventually the standard that all e-commerce retail will have to live up to. You know, that these are the standards that I think the bigger players are able to set up, and businesses like Parcel Hub and with your input means that it's increasingly accessible to all retailers, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great, thanks, James. And Tom, I think a question for you: How do I know if I've lost traffic? I think you've covered a lot of the aspects around the iOS tracking debate. You know, how do I know? How can I tell today whether I've lost traffic as a result of that update?
It's very similar how you'd review the process anyway. So you would be looking year on year in Google Analytics, but one of the big factors that you'll need to do there is look at the spend year on year. So if it's a similar level of spend, you should get an idea of how many clicks you're going to get through to it. And then secondly, look at your audience sizes. So if you had a 1.2 million size audience in last year, and you look at it this year and it's 800,000 or whatever it might be, that's how you'd have to balance it out. But it is a bit of a tough one, particularly with traffic, because optimizations happen all the time. You might get a smaller audience and get more sales, etc., etc. It's more of a complicated question than a couple of minute answer.
Of course. And again, we're available. Just I'm going to expand and make your life a bit more difficult.
Go for it.
Because you work with me.
Yeah.
So we talk about traffic, and we like to talk about traffic. Traffic is just a number, as we tell our clients.
Yep.
Let's just very, very quickly finish off on revenue. So how does this impact revenue? That's what our clients care about. That's what James and Steph's clients care about, actual revenue. How does it affect revenue tracking?
Massively. So I'd say particularly it's in the retargeting funnels, the way you're going to pick up the lost sales, the abandoned basket stuff. That's where you're really going to be affected rather than the top level of stuff. So if you blanketed it out over the year and year, your retargeting funnel's not going to be as effective, and there's definitely lost revenues there.
Superb. That's fine. And I think with that, we're gonna tie up the Q&A. So I'm going to give a really, really huge thanks to Tom, James, and Steph for giving up the time this morning. Hopefully their input, their presentations, their Q&A were really useful for our guests this morning across LinkedIn and Zoom. We're also on Twitter and Facebook and YouTube as well for the first time. So we are quite multi-channel. That's the end of today's Decoding Digital. It's the end of our December event. Thanks to our three speakers. I'm going to very quickly talk about January's event, which is called A Wealth of Experience. That's on Friday, the 28th of January, which is a few weeks from now. You can watch via LinkedIn Live again or any of the other channels I mentioned, or you can register on our website and join us here on Zoom. It means you can kick in with the Q&A and the chat. We've got three speakers, each looking at different aspects of improving customer experience and in turn increasing revenue. We've got Kevin Robinson, who's a senior conversion analyst from Brain Labs, Chloe Sinclair, who's the head of travel, transport, hospitality and logistics at UserZoom, and our very own Conrad Grimshaw, Door4's optimization consultant. Three handpicked professionals, all very knowledgeable on customer experience, all to give you a fantastic presentation in January. We welcome ideas for speakers and topics for future events. So those of you that are watching that think, I wish Door4 would cover such a topic that's related to performance marketing and reach and conversion in digital marketing, please drop me a line personally, leon@door4.com. All ideas are welcome. Keep your eyes out for our ads and emails. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Bye for now.